In a bold move that could reshape global trade dynamics, U.S. President Donald Trump announced his decision to impose a 50% tariff on copper imports. The announcement was made during a cabinet meeting in Washington, D.C., but the exact timing of when the tariff will take effect remains unclear. This decision follows a series of similar moves, including tariffs on steel, aluminum, lumber, and automobiles. Trump's announcement was clear. Why don't we add copper to the list? We've done steel and aluminum, now it's copper. This 50% tariff is seen as the latest chapter in a broader push by the U.S. to use trade tariffs as a tool to bolster national security and strengthen domestic industries. However, the immediate aftermath of this tariff has been anything but smooth. In less than 24 hours of Trump signing the order, the United States experienced a staggering loss of $4.2 billion. Copper prices on the COMEX exchange shot up by 13%, hitting a record high of $5.95 per pound. But that was just the beginning. Canada, a key supplier of refined copper to the U.S., immediately retaliated. Over 40% of the U.S. copper imports come from Canada, and within hours of the tariffs announcement, Canada froze all export contracts. Major mining giants like Teck Resources and Hudbay Minerals halted shipments to the American market, significantly disrupting the U.S. copper supply. In an official statement, Ottawa made its position clear. We can no longer rely on a trade partner that is unstable and unilaterally changes the rules of the game. With that, the foundation of the U.S. Canada copper trade relationship was shaken, and the market atmosphere began to change dramatically. U.S. industries that rely heavily on copper, such as electronics, construction, and automotive, were plunged into a supply crisis. Copper, the unassuming metal that powers everything from circuit boards to electric vehicles, became the focal point of a new trade war. And now it's American consumers who will bear the consequences, facing higher prices for cars, homes, and everyday goods that depend on copper. The question on everyone's mind is, what will the U.S. do when its tariff policies push entire sectors of its manufacturing base to the brink of collapse? If you're into global news, make sure to check out my other channel, Planet Watch. We dive deep into global news, and I know you'll love it. The link is in the description below. The trade war intensified following Trump's decision to activate Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act. This designation declared copper a strategic metal crucial to national security. With this, the 50% tariff was officially scheduled to take effect on August 1, 2025. The consequences were swift and profound. The U.S. market experienced a sudden spike in copper prices, particularly in CME futures contracts, which surged by 13% in a single day, reaching unprecedented levels of around $5.64 to $5.69 per pound. Meanwhile, on the London Metal Exchange, LME, copper prices saw no similar spike. In fact, prices dipped slightly due to fears of a potential decrease in U.S. demand. This led to a price gap, with copper in the U.S. costing as much as 25% more than on the LME. This disparity created an arbitrage market, a situation that many industry experts view as a significant flaw in the Trump administration's protectionist logic. Canada, the world's second-largest copper exporter, responded quickly and decisively. Within days, Canada announced its intent to diversify trade, severing its reliance on the U.S. as a customer. Canada began looking for new partners in Asia and Europe, signaling a shift that could reshape the copper trade landscape. In 2023, over 52% of Canada's copper exports went to the U.S. But with the imposition of this tariff, Canada's strategy quickly shifted. Mining giants like Glencore in Quebec had no choice but to reconsider their markets. They began pivoting to Japan, South Korea, and China, moving away from the U.S. and rethinking their entire supply chain. This was not just a symbolic gesture, it was a calculated move to secure Canada's position as a global copper supplier. Independent of the U.S. experts have warned that if the price gap persists, the U.S. could face a situation similar to the economic isolation seen during the Hoover era of the 1930s. Protectionist policies during that period led to a global trade freeze and prolonged economic stagnation. Now, with copper prices soaring and Canadian supply being rerouted, the U.S. is teetering on the edge of a similar crisis. In 2024, the U.S. imported roughly 810,000 tons of copper, primarily from Canada, Chile, Peru, and Mexico. Yet the U.S. only produces around 50% of the refined copper it consumes. Domestic refining capacity is limited, with plants like ASARCO in Arizona closing due to their inability to meet demand. This means that the 50% tariff doesn't address the underlying supply problem. Instead, it exacerbates the situation, driving up prices, limiting availability, and increasing the risks of prolonged supply chain disruptions. While the U.S. hoped to reduce its dependence on foreign copper by implementing tariffs, this strategy has led to skyrocketing prices, especially in the U.S. market. The Canadian response, pivoting to new markets, has created a major imbalance in the global copper supply chain, and the U.S. is paying the price. This tariff policy also triggered significant challenges in other sectors of the U.S. economy. The automotive industry, which relies heavily on copper for electric vehicles, is already feeling the strain. With copper prices soaring, the cost of manufacturing electric vehicles, EVs, has risen by approximately $90 per car, according to analysts. Major players like Tesla and Ford are reporting millions of dollars in losses, and some EV projects have already been postponed due to shortages of this critical material. Small manufacturers in states like Ohio and Indiana, who rely on imported copper for wiring and electronics, are also feeling the pinch. Imported copper wire prices have jumped by 18%, causing these businesses to lose contracts to overseas suppliers from countries like Vietnam and Thailand, where copper prices remain more stable. Utility companies in the U.S. are also experiencing a sharp increase in material costs, forcing them to file for emergency electricity rate hikes. Copper-based materials, such as conductors and transformer cores, have increased in price by 22 to 25%. This has resulted in higher utility bills for American consumers. The ripple effects of the 50% copper tariff are far-reaching. The construction sector is facing rising prices for insulation materials, while the EV industry is grappling with supply chain delays. The energy sector is fighting to stay afloat by raising prices. The result? U.S. GDP is projected to shrink by 0.5% in the coming quarter, as industries stall and businesses lose a combined $4.2 billion. Exactly the amount of copper trade that Canada effectively froze. The most significant consequence of this tariff, however, is felt by the American consumer. From power bills to home repairs to new cars, all of these costs will increase as copper prices continue to rise. The tariff's ripple effects are undeniable, and the U.S. will likely face a future of economic stagnation and inflation. By withdrawing from its role as a middleman in the copper supply chain, Canada has strategically positioned itself as a rival to the U.S. in this crucial sector. With a $1.8 billion investment plan to expand copper export capacity and build new infrastructure, Canada is transforming from a mere supplier into a serious competitor in the global metals market. This new era in the copper trade has far-reaching implications for the U.S. economy. The question remains, is this tariff truly a great deal, or is it the beginning of a self-inflicted rupture from the global trade network? Only time will tell, but one thing is certain: the 50% copper tariff marks a pivotal moment in the global trade landscape, and the American consumer will bear the costs for years to come. If you found this video insightful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned for more updates and content. We've got plenty more coming your way.